and now I would like to introduce you all to. Let me just make sure I get his camera prepared here in some way. There it is. All right, this is Brandon, also known as a BS Opinion, and welcome, Brandon.
Thank you, Richard. Pleasure to be here.
All right, and so we requested that you do some research into the electoral college. But before that, I just want you to kind of introduce yourself to the folks and just tell them a little bit about yourself and what brought you here and what you're looking to get to do while you're here with us.
Well, my name is Brandon. I'm from Brooklyn. I'm an anthropologist, PhD candidate. What brought me here was you can only stream at the TV for so long. You can only stream at MSNBC and CNN and, well, not Fox News. I don't watch Fox News. I love myself too much for that. And I just want to support independent media, like everyone should. Like everyone should.
Uh,
And
Go ahead.
And I know you were afraid that disenfranchisement and disenchanting of voters would end with the primary, but no, no. We have to talk about the Electoral College now. The original way we disenfranchise and disenchant people within our electoral system.
Yeah, I think part of it, I think hopefully some of the information that you got will help elucidate for us that really the system that we have isn't what we've been sold through media and pomp and circumstance and propaganda as far as regarding how it actually functions and what are some of the nuances. And so, from what I heard so far, it sounded like you had some really interesting stuff. So go ahead and provide us some more information.
Well, I mean, just to foreground the fact, the Electoral College was always meant as a sort of guard against democracy by the founding fathers, a guard against the populace having undue influence over the presidency because the populace are unwashed, uneducated, uh, prone to passion. Just some basic facts that people probably know already. There are 538 electors, electoral college, uh, which mirrors the number of senators and congressmen for each state, plus three for DC. To win the presidency, you need 270 votes, and if you don't get that for whatever reason, whether it's a multi-party race, which might happen, that the House goes to decide what occurs after that. The system that we do have now is a winner take all electoral process in every state except for Maine and Nebraska. So, what that essentially means is if you win the plurality of votes within a state, you get all of the electoral votes for that state. So, you can say win 35, 30, 30, 40, any sort of uh, variation of that, and you will get all of the states, which essentially means that the other votes for that state are just lost. So the popular vote, so say you in a situation where it's 51% Gore, 49% Bush, 49% of those votes simply don't count towards the presidency. Uh, so I say in theory because most electors are unbound, so only 29 states actually require by law that the electoral college electors for that state vote along with the popular vote. The other 21 do not. And within those 29 states that do require that you actually vote along those lines, the punishment for not voting along those lines can range from a misdemeanor crime to about $1,000 fine. So basically, if you choose to disenfranchise people, you get a fine that's less than littering in some places.
That
Just that.
is, yeah, that doesn't sound very like strong enforcement on it. So they rely heavily on tradition. It sounds like that.
Well,
Go ahead.
well, yeah, I guess, except for the fact that since the inception, as of 2008, 157 electors have not voted along the line. The last time was in 2000, where one of the electors from DC decided not to cast a vote for president because of in protest to voting rights in DC itself. So the way electors are allocated per state is basically on average 550,000 people get one delegate in the electoral college, with two extra ones, one for every senator. The problem with that is that states that have less than 550,000 people, or less than about a million, get disproportionate amount of representation within the system itself. So, for example, in Wyoming, it's one delegate per 170,000 people, which means if you're voting in Wyoming, your vote is worth 3 times that of someone voting in another place with a higher population.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. If by interesting you mean depressing.
Yeah, I mean, it's I mean, as being a part of some minority groups, it like I can understand the desire of trying to preserve a minority of people's ability to influence political things somewhat disproportionately, but at the same time, as a Washington State resident, I'm familiar with the other side of that argument, being on the western side versus the eastern side. Where they feel basically that they don't have appropriate representation because most of the population is concentrated over here. And so, and whereas we see it from a slightly different perspective in that, a lot of the revenue is generated over here and a lot of the people are here, so that explains why most of the resources end up here. But the details of which is a much more in depth local story. And I keep doing this. Sorry, folks. Sorry to you, Brandon. I keep leaving people on camera while I'm talking. So sorry about that, people. That was some great information there. And you mentioned the plurality. So one of the things that makes me think of is so if it only takes about 30, let's say in a three-way race, split evenly, you just need to get to 34%, and leave the other at 32 and 33 or approximately in order to get all of the electoral votes for that. So when people talk about a third party splitting up the map or stopping somebody from getting to 270, it seems to me what they're suggesting is that they're going to capture enough states just to deprive either of the people to get from 270. But I don't think that accurately, in my opinion, accounts for if they all do approximately equally well, that then it's possible or probable that one of them could sweep a significant amount of states, and it changes the entire electoral map in that if there's three people in a race, depending on their political affiliations, it changes what state could be a swing state. And because if something's reliably red, let's say it's a reliably Republican state, but they also have a large anti-Trump movement. If you get a candidate in there that is an acceptable alternative to Trump, then that could take a like a strongly held Republican state, and because he's only holding about a third, and Hillary Clinton may be able to get a third of the reliable Democrats, Bernie could could potentially win with a coalition of disillusioned Republicans and with non-Democrats, independents, and with basically everybody else that's left. Not to mention, one of the factors I think that and I see some quizzical faces, so I'm going to definitely come back to you, is that we're not accounting for the rough almost 50% of the population that typically doesn't vote, but could. That a reality TV election like Trump is offering them could be the thing that takes them from tweeting about the Kardashians to voting. And the Twitter war that Hillary has engaged with today, I didn't mention it in headlines, but I'm sure many people saw the delete your delete your account or whatever tweet from Hillary. That is where we're heading. And if this turns into a Twitter beef, an elongated one, especially with Trump, who's been at this for a while, it could significantly change the electorate we're dealing with in general, so that traditional perspectives may not even apply. But go ahead and get in there. I talked for a while.
Well, I mean, no, I think that speaks to some of the intended and unintended consequences of having an electoral college system. And one of those unintended consequences, which you mentioned, is the way people calculate their vote and how much their vote is worth is just affected so heavily by the fact that it's an all or nothing case. So you say, if I don't vote for either Trump or uh, Clinton, my vote is wasted. Or even if I vote at all within a red state and I vote blue, my vote is essentially wasted. So it's hard to sort of uh, square that circle for people. It changes the entire metric. And as you mentioned, voter turnout is going down in most states that are not swing states. So what people don't realize is that at the end of the day, most of the money and most of the time spent by candidates takes place in 9 states. So you say in 2009, 99% of television ad budget was spent in 9 states, and 100% of the public appearances of Obama and Romney and Paul Ryan and Vice President Biden was spent in 11 states. Although they did go to private functions, private fundraiser functions in the other 39 states where donors could buy a plate for $1,000, $10,000 a plate, they just did not hold public rallies because they did not see the value of it. So on average, we're seeing a drop in voter turnout in non-swing states, non-battleground states by roughly 7%, and an uptick in swing states more often than not. So at the end of the day, the two-party system only serves to like, both reinforce that electoral college, and their electoral college serves to reinforce the two-party system. Because even if you, for say, Gary Johnson got 1% of the popular vote in 2012, he got no electoral vote. So at the end of the day, it seems like he didn't get anything. It's about the perception of how much your vote matters and how well someone did, and that has a really big impact on how people vote in the future.
Yeah, and it's been I think this election has drawn attention to a lot of different assets or facets of voting and the process and how that all works in ways that I don't think a lot of people were expecting. Especially, given 4 years ago, I think Hillary's email issues are a pretty good example of that. I think she underestimated how far Republicans would go to drag out everything, and that she would actually leave something potentially damaging out there, and that not the media but people would be so persistent about it, and that she would be at such a low trust and favorability rating that in my opinion, it seems like it's very hard for her to be able to recover from that. And from what I'm familiar with, she hasn't ever run a race where she's significantly increased her support. In the few races that she's run, her support started at a peak and essentially went almost only exclusively down from that point. Say with Obama, there was a slight uptick in general, but especially particularly towards the end. But it was a moderate amount, and I don't. To me, she just does not seem like the uh, the strongest candidate that the Democrats can put forward. And I'll go ahead and let you. I was going to say on that note, we're going to have Adair coming on shortly. For those of you that just joining us, this is Project Sanity, and we just got done talking about California a little bit, and we're about to move on to Washington State's caucus, and then where me and Adair are going to be, and then Adair is going to be going to the national convention. But before we leave this segment, if you had something else that you wanted to close on regarding the Electoral College.
Oh well, I mean, just to go for what you said, Clinton is the Democratic Mitt Romney. Uh, that is who she is. She exists in this establishment bubble where the only challenges towards her so far, or prior to this email scandal, were just Republican flights of fancy and baseless attacks. And she treated everything as though it were just politics. Oh, it's just politics. It's just politics. Benghazi is all about politics, and that just is not flying with this FBI investigation because it seems as though she actually did break the law, at least the law as it stands. So whether or not she is indicted, or I don't think she's gonna, or not, or it just it just shows the kind of bulletproof feeling that she has. She felt bulletproof, and
And Obama withholding the release of her involvement in those particular emails until after the election doesn't have a very good look to it. And I know also, I guess I should mention, Obama came out and endorsed Hillary, if anybody hadn't heard. Uh, I think the idea that they're going for is getting like people that people like and respect. Excuse me, I did it again. Getting people that like and respect uh, other folk, like the people that people like and respect, like Obama or whatever, to endorse Hillary to make Hillary look better. But I don't think that they realize that it's largely having the reverse effect of just making whoever gets behind her look worse. Like That's my opinion personally. Like I understand the political ramifications and many other things, and I have my qualms with Obama, and I won't dig into Obama right now into too much depth, but that
Well,
it didn't it made him look worse in my opinion than it made her look better.
I mean, I agree, but I think that's only because it's not necessarily Hillary Clinton herself who's toxic, but that sort of establishment thinks that it's toxic right now.
Yeah,
And she's symbolic of. So attaching yourself to Clinton is an attachment to the establishment politics as usual.
yeah.
And
I was gonna say, as Bernie says, is like those of us that are supporting Bernie are doing it because we don't think establishment politics can fix these problems, and I think we have a long history of evidence, but and without digging into that too much, I think go ahead.
no, I mean you said it so eloquently right there. But I would even go as far as say people who are sort of Hillary Clinton is not identifying a problem at all. She doesn't like her platform is more status quo. Even the people who she chose to be on her DNC committee were all corporative. They were all elite business people, and that's really demonstrative of what she views to be the problem with America right now. The biggest problem with America, that we don't have enough money going towards corporations. And when you compare that to Bernie's choices, you have racial scholars, you have Native American activists, you have climate change scientists. He is running the gamut and identifying all of what he feels to be most pressing concerns that can be solved through policy with his choices. And her choices were just, I don't know, the neoliberal Power Rangers.
Yep. And so and I think I could go on about this, but we're gonna circle back. So stick with us, Brandon. We'll bring you back on later when we're gonna have a discussion just about what we've covered today. We're changing. We're doing a little loosey goosey with the format. So just stick around, and at the end we're gonna have a conversation about the things that we talked about at the beginning of the show and throughout. Next up, we have Adair. So I'm just gonna want to thank you, Brandon. A BS opinion. You'll probably be able to find him in chat either now or in the future, and so check him out. And with that, I want to go ahead and get Adair on here. So just give me a moment, Adair, and I'll get you queued up on screen here for us. And there we are. So hello, Adair. Welcome to Project Sanity. Thank you so much for your patience and working with us to get you out here. Just a brief introduction on Adair. I think you might be muted, or
Can you hear me?
oh, there we go. Okay. So just thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us. He's a congressional delegate moving to the national convention in Philly, and he's representing out of the 10th district, my home district. We're both going to be going to the state convention coming up, and I'm going to help ship him off to Philly. And one of the things we'll be talking about later, but we'll make sure a lot of the delegates don't have $4,000 or so laying around to get there. So we're going to make sure to get Adair's link out there and some of the other Washington delegates, just so that if you have a person or something that you want, if you can help anyone, please help. Every dollar helps, and they're already working on sharing costs and doing all those types of things. But people just wanted to make sure that they could get it out there as soon as possible. So we'll go into that later. But Adair, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself beyond my introduction, if you would.
Just real quick, guys. I'm sorry to do this. We talked about it a little bit earlier. Let's go Pens tonight. Win game 5, bring home the cup.
All right, cut the interview.
But no, I'm a student at the Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington, which is also in the 10th Congressional District, which serves Thurston County, University Place, Faircrest, Steilacoom, and Spanaway, I want to say.
Yep.
But I'm not. Yeah, so that is the 10th Congressional District here in Washington. I am a physics major with a minoring in biochemistry, so kind of on the nerdy side of college and a huge Bernie supporter since day one. But I'm really excited to be here and really excited to go to Philly and represent people from Washington State, and not just Washington State, but what we as Bernie supporters feel our core values are. Go and actually fight for those things in Philadelphia, in enemy territory, but Philadelphia nonetheless. And I mean, really, I'm open to any and all suggestions. If anybody in Washington or even outside that would like to know about what's going on, what I'm going to be doing, I mean, feel free to get in touch with me. I'd love to hear your ideas, what you'd like to see, and just hear from some of the people. That's what we're going there for.
Yeah, and that's if anybody wants to chime in and chat and ask a question about what Adair knows about the National Convention, anything that I may miss, or just about how they can get more information to reach out to their delegate, so that they can have this conversation that I'm so lucky to have with Adair, and I'm so lucky also to be able to share with you guys. He's going to represent me in Philly, so I'm going to ask him and talk to him about some of the things that I would like him to do when he gets there. And I want you all to be a part of that, and I think that fits right in with what he was talking about. And Adair's also going to work with us, Project Sanity, and with the Benjamin Dixon channel in general, and just with the worldwide internet as far as getting what's out there out. And so make sure to follow him on Twitter, your handle.
Adair Schmidt, it's ADAIRSCHMIDT. That is my handle on Twitter. That is also, funny enough, my email address, so if it's easier for you to email me, take that Twitter handle and just add @gmail.com to it, and I'll be sure to get back to everybody as quickly as I possibly can. I would love to hear from everyone and anyone.
Yeah, so again, thank you so much for making yourself available, and thank everybody in the audience. Again, this is Project Sanity, and on the Benjamin Dixon channel, so subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks again for joining us. Share if you think anybody else, if you know anybody else that would be interested in seeing a conversation between a delegate and their representative regarding who's going to California, or not to California, excuse me, to Philadelphia. And so, yeah, right. It'd be cheaper too. Man. So anyway, but if you know that somebody's interested, share on Facebook, Twitter, wherever you can. Help people find these conversations so that they can start conversations of their own, and hopefully they can share them with us and with the web, so that we can all have a good idea of what kind of delegates we're sending and what we can expect from them and what they're expecting, so that if we see something on the news, we know if they're going to be surprised by it as well. So before we go into, or go ahead.
Other delegates, please feel free to get a hold of me as well. Regular people, people with questions, other delegates, party members, whomever, please feel free to get in touch with me. I would love to chat with any and all of you, but in particular other delegates, especially first-timers like myself. It's always good to get together and share what information we do have.
Fritz Carl says, promise to boo Hillary in Philly.
I think that's the tradition, right? Like, if you're in Philly, you have to boo whoever's out there. So, I mean, I'm sure I'll get a few boos myself. I plan on wearing this Penguins jersey out there, but absolutely. I mean,
yeah, you get boo. You get one right now. For those of you not familiar, Pittsburgh and Seattle and Washington in general just have a long sports history, not particularly in hockey, and I'm not a particularly hockey fan, but it's a rivalry. It goes back. So, without dwelling on that for the sake of our audience, I wanted you to tell us a little bit about the process of how you went from, person going to Evergreen to Washington State National Delegate for representing Bernie in Philly.
Yeah, I mean, so here's a little bit of background for those of you who are not in Washington, and those of you who are but haven't been able to go to a caucus yet, how our caucus system works. So we first split up by our legislative districts here within the state. Excuse me. I happen to reside in the 28th legislative district for Washington. So I showed up to my caucus location at Curtis High School, go Vikes, and I sat down at my precinct table, the 528, and, funny enough, a few of my, it's all set up by neighbors, so a few of my neighbors showed up, and I was just kind of sitting at the table and waiting for somebody who knew what they were doing to take the lead, and then the party chair for the 28th said, your PCO will now do preside over your precinct caucuses. Please look at the middle envelope and follow the rules inside of there. So I looked around, and I asked, I said, who's our PCO? And the guy sitting next to me tapped me on the shoulder and said, you are. So I was kind of voluntold that I'd be the PCO that day, so stood up, ran the caucus as best I could. I'm a total newbie. I was not quite 18 in 2008, so I didn't really get to participate then. But we went along through that. We got our delegates figured out. All 8 of my precincts delegates ended up going to Senator Sanders because the 2 that originally were going to go to Clinton decided they didn't want to be delegates. So after trying to give out as many delegate spots to everybody as I could while following the rules for the Democratic Party, we must have an equal number of men and women delegates. So came to the end, and we had one more male delegate spot left, which I I guess my precinct, I'll call them, said, "You're going to be it." And so at that point, I was like, well, I'm kind of in it, so I may as well be in it for the long haul. Show up to the next caucus, which is the district level caucuses, which was only for delegates. So at this point, there's roughly 27,000 delegates from every precinct in Washington state. Once there, we vote again to send delegates to our congressional district caucuses, which is, funny enough, where I met Richard, a.k.a. Progressive Green. That's where I met him. But, I mean, so at the district level, you're running, again, at my district of 28, we had 14 total delegates to give out, 7 men, 7 women. Excuse me. There was roughly 200 people there. I want to say between 200 and 230 delegates. Roughly 80 men ran, and I want to say close to 60 or 70 women also ran. I was lucky enough to be one of the 7 men to be able to go on to the congressional districts. Once there, I gave a 1-minute speech. Richard can attest to that. I'm surprised it went over as well as it did, quite honestly, and was voted by a group of my peers to become one of their Bernie delegates. I'm one of 5 delegates for Bernie Sanders from the 10th congressional district. There are 2 men and 3 women, and then there is 1 male Hillary delegate, also from our congressional district. So I mean, it was a bit of a wild ride, but I mean, honestly, I couldn't be more honored and more privileged to represent such a diverse group of hardworking people in Washington State and to carry this torch on to Philadelphia.
Sorry, I'm over here pressing buttons here. And no, and I'm thankful. I wasn't sure, like you said, that there's at the congressional district caucus, you had about a minute to speak, and what drew me to picking you was you basically said what I had thought I was going to talk about, more or less. Like, I didn't know exactly how I was going to say it, but that was the angle I was going to work, and you nailed it. And I was like, well, hopefully that matches up with some of the other stuff, and so that's what got you my vote. And so I know, and I keep doing this because I keep being silly. Yep. All right, here we go. Sorry, folks. I'm working the best I can. Had some last minute change. Nis wasn't able to join us today, and so we have some special guests. This is Adair Schmidt. He's a Washington delegate for the National Convention for Bernie Sanders. And I just want to again mention for those of you just joining us, Ben's going to be on in just over an hour, and he's going to have Adolph Reed, political professor, on, and that should be a great show. Make sure you tune in for that. Until then, we're going to continue with Adair, and we're going to continue with Adair and what's going on at the convention, or what the plan is for the convention. So. Tell us just a little bit about what you're thinking the convention is going to look like, just off the top.
So, just the little bit of information that I have been able to gather, there is a wonderful page for Washington State Democrats, the delegates. So if there's any other delegates who haven't yet liked the page, please do. We'll invite you. Welcome in group. But I mean, basically, it's what it sounds like. It's a lot of meetings throughout the day. So in the morning, we go to one site. I can't remember the name of it, and we sit down. There's a bunch of meetings. We vote on what kind of things we want to see in the platform. There's already an executive committee in place that's writing up the platform as is. So much like any of the other convention levels, whether you've been to state or county ones, we get together. We see what the current proposals are. Then we vote on those proposals, and we vote on amendments, and we vote on adding different language to the platform that we want to see. And then later on in the evening, we go to wherever the heck it is their professional hockey team, who I refuse to name, plays, and then we have the rest of our convention work doing there. So we'll be doing that for every day through July 28th, when we actually will vote on who we want the nominee to be. And personally, I plan to try to sway as many Hillary delegates over to Senator Sanders as absolutely possible. I mean, that's one of the things I was voted to do while I'm there. So
Awesome. That I know we talked a little bit beforehand about some of the ideas that you had as far as what you may how you may try to sell to Hillary supporters at
Right.
this level, that Bernie may still be the right choice that they can make, and what it would take in order to sway them. Do you want to give us any insight into any of those plans? I don't want you giving away too much strategy if you're not comfortable. But
I mean, to be quite honest with you, it's a lot of what we're doing now. I feel the most effective way of reaching a person who may have a slightly different opinion than you is to sit down and talk with them. Because really, I've talked to Hillary delegates, and I had quite Hillary supporters rather. I had a few of them in my precinct, and a few of them actually came over to Sanders' side after hearing about actual lived experiences of these neoliberal policies that we're seeing. So, for those who don't know, I was a child when Bill Clinton was president, and I was also one of those children that were referred to as super predators. Kind of funny going from super predator to nearly college graduate planning to go on to graduate school, but hey, whatever they want to call us. I lived through those policies. I lived through that neoliberal ideology. I lived through the crime bill. I lived through the welfare reform acts, where really they took these incredibly Republican ideas and then tried to package them as, oh, we're really going to help poor people. We're the party of help. But really all they did was hurt. You took families from much better areas. I wouldn't quite call them good just yet. That was a poor choice of words. And when you took that welfare away from them, a lot of them could only afford to live in housing projects. A lot of them could only afford to move to the bad parts of town. I personally went from somewhere that was fairly decent to one of the most violent areas in Tacoma. It's not a good thing. It's not a good area for a child to be raised in, and it is directly linked to these policies of Bill Clinton. Friends of mine that I've known for years, or people that I grew up with, are unable to advance their education because of whatever they got involved with as a kid. 9 out of 10 times it had to do with pot, which is now legal in Washington State, but for a very long time wasn't. They can't get Pell Grants. A lot of them did serious jail time because of that crime bill. That idea of being tough on crime really destroys families, because you're not giving anybody the opportunity to be reformed. You're not giving them the opportunity to get their life together, to advance. All they're doing is taking these incredibly, incredibly destructive ideas that have been branded as extremists, and Republicans do that, not us. We're the party of the people, and shoved it down our throats. But he was so charismatic doing it that everyone just kind of laid down and accepted it, and still remember him fondly today. So these are real. Her policy decisions have real life consequences, and that's one of the things Hillary supporters have got to understand. We're real people. We're really hurt by these policies. We're not some abstract figure. We're not just a set of numbers. We're not just data. These are children not making it to C21 because their family has to move to an area with such high violence rates because they can't afford to live anywhere else, because they don't have that welfare anymore. This is about not you, not me, not any of us watching, quite frankly. This is about the children. This is about your children, not you specifically, but those of you watching. This is about your grandchildren, your nieces, your nephews, every single child in this country deserves a fair shot at the future, and we all want the next generation to be able to do better than us. And the only candidate that offers that is Senator Sanders. That's the only one.
yep, and that is why Adair is going to Philly to speak on my behalf, and why I am thankful. And Adair is just one of several delegates, 5 to be exact, coming out of the 10th congressional district, and all 5 are amazing people.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm floored by just having met with quite a few of them. And I actually, I have a Google Doc here from our super secret delegate Facebook page that has fundraising links that are all GoFundMe's. So at any point, there's quite a lot of them, because it is for everyone that is listed it throughout the state, from Congressional District 1 way up north near Canada all the way down to us in the 10th congressional district.
Yeah, so if you like Adair speaking and you have the opportunity to be able to help out and give a few bucks, please send it his way. Or if you just want to pick from that list of GoFundMe's and just read the little blurbs that they gave about why they're going to Philly and find one that resonates with you, find somebody who's representing what you especially want to hear go out in Philly. It's a great resource, and people would be immensely thankful for any help that they can get. Uh, the hotels are expensive, and the events are done inside the hotel, and so you either have to get there very early in all of that convention traffic from some other location, which is very difficult for most people to be able to achieve, or you have to be able to spring to pay several $100s a night to stay in the hotel room. So
What they're telling us is not to stay somewhere else at this point. My first official email from the Bernie campaign said that the Sanders campaign is requiring that as many delegates stay at that hotel as possible, just because they don't want to run the risk of us not being able to make it for whatever reason. Other delegates, both from Hillary and Bernie's side, have said that there's going to be a lot of security checkpoints. Traffic in and of itself is going to be absolutely horrendous getting to the hotel, getting from the hotel. It is imperative that we get as many delegates at the hotel as possible. Frankly, I am biased and would love to see as many Bernie delegates there as possible, but each of them is duly elected, and we have to have them there. We can't afford not to.
And so I know Adair is working hard himself to scrape together whatever funds he can, doing anything he can to get the money together. I know he's trying to, he's got many activities going on locally, and so do all the other delegates, and trying to just get as much support out there as possible. So if you can, go ahead, and if you come across Adair's GoFundMe and you can just give it a retweet, and maybe somebody else will find it and be able to help out, that would be amazing. I really appreciate what Adair's doing for me and for all of us in the 10th district, and I appreciate all of Bernie's supporters helping contribute towards making the convention in Philly what it needs to be, which is basically, in my opinion, an intervention with the establishment and power. And so I think that you guys are going to have a lot of support outside as well.
Yeah.
And,
Oh yeah.
go ahead.
There's a planned rally actually by the Sanders campaign. One of my fellow delegates shared that information. They're going to get permits for it already, so they're looking to have a huge Sanders rally. A lot of the Bernie or Bust folks are coming out. I think at one point someone was saying they were trying to organize as many people as they possibly could to stand outside of the convention hall and just let everybody know who the people wanted. So, I mean, it's a huge deal, everyone trying to get there. And personally, from my end, I will be attaching to my GoFundMe link towards the end of my fundraising campaign a link to my Facebook page specifically for the convention, as well as a link to my Snapchat, as I plan to do as many live streaming pictures, videos, everything they will absolutely allow me to do inside the convention hall, on the convention floor, during the meetings and the votes, so that way it is as transparent as possible. So long as they will let me do it, and I can record it, take a picture, live stream it, I will be disseminating that information far and wide. So that will also be on my GoFundMe page. I've raised a little over $300, which is almost enough for a night in the hotel, assuming I'm unable to get roommates that can follow through. It's a very complicated process.
Yes, and I think it speaks to our state party and the Democratic Party at large says that they won't exclude people based off of their means, but by making it sure, for example, a Washington delegate running them about $4,000 in order to fulfill their obligation as a representative of the people, that surely seems like a barrier to participation to me. I mean. Maybe I'm lonely in that I don't have $4,000 just laying around that I can burn up on a vacation to Philly to stand in a hot, sweaty convention hall with a bunch of people that we just got done having a very heated campaign with. I don't know. Maybe everybody else has that.
So for the delegates, I think there's only one self-funded campaign listed so far from our list. There's only one person who said they're self-funded. The rest of us have to raise this money. I mean, just a flight to Philadelphia, I think round trip right now is looking at $600. So I mean, it is crazy expensive just to get there. And this is what's so crazy to me. On the opening night that we get there, so we're going to fly in there. We have to be there the 24th, the evening of the 24th, 5:30 to 6. We're boarding a cruise ship on the Delaware, and we're having a party with the Washington and Massachusetts delegations. We're renting a cruise ship. We're literally renting a cruise ship on the river, but cannot, really get as much help, at least from what I've been told, for delegates to actually get there. Which, as awesome as this cruise ship is going to be, and I will for sure take pictures and videos there as well, I think it's a little bit ridiculous that we have money for a cruise ship, but not to get the delegation there. I think that's patently ridiculous.
Yeah, it seems a little ass backwards, really, frankly, and that, like, well, wait a minute. Like, well, actually, that's exactly what they want, isn't it? That party with none of the people who can afford to get there. That, two birds, one stone.
Right. It's crazy. I mean, and you would be surprised how entrenched that thinking actually is. I've posted my GoFundMe link to several Facebook groups for Bernie, and a few of the reply I've gotten more often than not is, well, if you couldn't afford to go, why even run? And I feel that's counterintuitive to what the entire campaign has been saying from day one, where everybody should have the ability to participate regardless of, your socioeconomic standing, ethnicity, education level, whatever. Every American should have the right to be a part of this process. And to put these barriers up, to say, well, you don't have $4,000, you can't go represent, and here in the Chins we represent a little over 120,000 registered voters. But because I don't have $4,000 just to, drop to go to Philly, people are saying, well, then you shouldn't have bothered running in the first place. And I think that is a ridiculous notion in and of itself.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, it's not just people generically saying it. You're talking about other Bernie supporters that are saying, and that was a pitch that I know I heard at various levels of the caucuses. Basically,
Yes.
people saying, well, I have the money already situated to go, so, pick me. And it's just like, while I appreciate the foresight and the ability to get that together, that shouldn't be one of the criteria that I'm judging you to go represent me in Philly. In my opinion, that's my perspective. Is that I shouldn't your bank account shouldn't be what I'm looking at when I'm regarding how you're going to represent my perspective on the floor in Philly. And so that, to me, like you said, seems counterintuitive, seems against the message of what Bernie is about, what the movement is supporting, what we're trying to get accomplished. And along with the cruise ship, is that we need to get people there to represent the people, so long as we're going to stick with this archaic system. We have to get people to the places that they need to be if they've been elected to represent people. I mean, we wouldn't just, elect the president and be like, okay, now just get your own ride to the White House.
Right.
So it's like we need if the party doesn't, I mean, you could push the blame around a lot of places, but this is, I think, a basic functionality of the party is to make sure that your delegates get to the event that you have for them to vote at. Well, and I have a feeling that they wouldn't, that Hillary supporters will have a little bit more party support within the state in order to amass that money. I don't know if you've heard anything regarding that.
Well, I've heard, not that in particular, but I have heard of some very interesting things happening from state party members. So, again, being in the 28th, my chair, funny enough, made it all the way to the Congressional District Caucus. She is a very, 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 very big Hillary supporter, as is...
Sorry, I just want to, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I noticed we have some new people watching, so I just want to let people know this is Project Sanity. Nis was not able to join us today, but right now we have Adair, who is a delegate out of Washington State, going to the National Convention in Philly to represent Bernie. And I just want people to thank you for joining us. Share around. Ben will be on in about a little under 50 minutes, so stay tuned. He's going to have Adolph Reed Jr. on, so make sure to tune in for that. That should be a great. Adolph Reed is a political professor and just got some really great stuff, so just make sure to check that out. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt it there, so go on.
So my legislative Democrat chair, she made it to the congressional district caucuses, and while there, we actually elected our members of the Electoral College. And while I was going to sign up, I heard her having a conversation, actually telling other voters not to run. Her exact words were, "You can't run because we all agreed together that I would be our elector. So you can't run because you're going to split our vote. You have to be voting for me." That doesn't sit well with me personally. I don't feel that at any level of politics, even for something as like the Electoral College, where in Washington State you are bound to vote by whoever wins the popular vote. So say the Democrat wins here in Washington, all 12 Democrat electors will show up, cast their ceremonial ballots, and then be on their way. If, God forbid, Trump were to win Washington State, then all 12 Republican electors would show up and cast theirs for him. I don't think that's acceptable. But this isn't the first time things like this have happened. The very first caucus in March, Hillary supporters were being told, "This is where you go, this is what you do, here's how you get any and all questions you need answered," were answered, accurate information, they knew what they were doing. Bernie supporters were kind of left in the dark. We were very much floundering and had no real access to information. There was no one telling us, here's where to sign up to run as a delegate, here's where you go do this. And this has happened at every level that we've been to. At the legislative district level, when you had to sign up, people were being told no one knew where to go and do it at. We had to disseminate that information amongst ourselves. So one Bernie delegate found out, and they went around and they told another one who told another one who told another one, whereas Hillary delegates walked in the door and were told, "Oh, go sign up there to go to the congressional district caucuses, but don't tell the other delegates, we'll take care of this." This is the kind of backroom dealing that's going on at the state level. I can only imagine what's going on at a national level for these kinds of things. And I realize I sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I would argue that this is politics as usual. This is what politics is about. It is those few in power wanting to remain in power, so they do what they can to stay that way. They find ways to get the person who they feel, in this case Hillary Clinton, which is, who epitomizes the idea of the Democratic establishment. They did everything they could to make sure her walk in Washington was as smooth as possible, even though Bernie won over 70% of the vote in the state. All of our superdelegates are currently, except for two, I believe, and they both switched to Senator Sanders, are supporting Hillary Clinton. Your state voted overwhelmingly for Senator Sanders. Yet our elected officials are saying, well, I don't care what you say, I'm voting for Hillary Clinton at the convention. What you do with your personal vote is your business, and I urge you to cast it no matter whom you vote for. But do not abuse your power to take away my vote as a Washington State citizen. We voted for Bernie Sanders. We also voted for those elected officials. I now know who I'm not voting for when they run for re-election, because they refuse to listen to what we had to say.
Yeah, and I think that was interesting, especially, was it Heck that was at the at ours, where Bernie supporters were he tried to come in, and he's a local representative out of Washington State, and he tried to come in and it's national representative from Washington, but anyway, he tried to come in and give us a neutral-ish speech, because the room was probably, what was it like
easy
80-20 Bernie, give or take, and so it was definitely heavily Bernie, and he's one of those that basically was ignoring us and saying he's going to vote this other way regardless. And I give him kudos for at least having the chutzpah to show up. Several elected officials didn't show up at the county convention,
right,
despite being scheduled, and not just in our local county convention, but at other county conventions across the state. So kudos to him for at least having the guts to show up. But it's interesting how we were shushed down when we were disagreeing with some of the statements that he made, or Bernie supporters were letting their discontent with his with his position be known.
By that,
but then they're gonna but then they also, it's weird that they want us to listen to them, but they don't want to listen to us.
Right.
And I think that applies to the Hillary campaign as well. And one of the things that I got a kick out of was just, and it pairs off of a comment from Field of Burn TV out in chat about raising money if Bernie suspends or backs Clinton, and that like they were talking about Bernie supporters donating to Hillary, and I mean, I imagine some. I imagine some, but I know I won't be donating to Hillary. That's for damn sure.
Well,
And so
that's. I mean, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just under any circumstances like she already sold out to the corporatists. I'm not going to give them both another whatever 27 of my dollars, which
Right.
it mentions about with Bernie endorsing, and that's a question I want to ask you shortly.
Yeah.
If he does back out and or endorse, what does that mean? Like actually, I'll just go ahead and ask now, and you can if you still have your comment, you can mention it beforehand. But what does it mean to you if Bernie either backs out or basically suspends his campaign and or endorses Hillary in between now and the convention? What does that mean to you, and what are you going to do at the convention as a result of that? You don't have to have that all known, but just
Well,
allow me
I
into your thought process.
I know what I'm going to do if he suspends his campaign. I'm going to campaign for Senator Bernie Sanders. I'm going to campaign for him on my way to Philadelphia. I'm going to campaign for him at the convention, and I'm going to cast my vote as an elect delegate for Bernie Sanders. That is what the people of my congressional district wanted. That is what I will do. I'm not there to represent my own self-interests. I'm not there to rub elbows and make political connections. I'm there to represent people from the 10th Congressional District of Washington State, and they have overwhelmingly said, we want you to go and we want you to campaign for Senator Sanders. What it means, though, I feel this has to be approached in a broader context. I feel it means a significant defeat for the idea of the liberal movement in general. A lot of what we've seen in the Bernie camp is something we haven't seen as liberals for a very, very long time. And I use that term to encompass many different ideologies, from the moderate liberal to someone like myself who's an avowed socialist and, radical leftist. We're a big group. But something I've seen in this campaign is the addition of young, privileged white millennials, right, who have felt that if they're not winning, everything has to be rigged against them. And I think that's the perception we have to fight. And that's one of the things that has been this big crux of the issue, is that I think there's a bunch of demagoguery going on from the establishment. I think there's been a lot of voter suppression coming from the establishment. I think there's been a whole myriad of issues coming from the establishment. But one of the things I do feel is that if Senator Sanders was to suspend his campaign and throw his support behind Hillary Clinton, whom I would not vote for personally, I'd vote in Green Party if we don't have Bernie in there. He'll die in 2016. I feel that it really represents what we as liberals are about, which is compromise. And that's not something in this case that I agree with. As I said, my convictions are my convictions. I will not vote for Hillary Clinton if Senator Sanders bows out. But there's this idea, this idea that, we're so elitist, we're so much better than if something doesn't go our way, well, somebody had to rig the game from the jump. I think there was a lot of issues, right? There was a lot of issues, but I feel that this liberal movement has to put this in perspective. Has to put this in the perspective of what Senator Sanders has done and the amazing work, this coalition of people whom he's brought together that you don't always see. It's not often that I find myself on the same side of the political spectrum as, the farmer from a conservative area. It's very unusual that we find ourselves supporting the same candidate. But here in Washington State, that's the case by and large.
It was very fascinating to see the amalgamation of people that were showing up to these events, and I know there was a very moving speech at my precinct level from a disabled person that was wanted to be an advocate, and I know that we do have some people that are disabled delegates, a variety at the state level. I'm not sure if any made it to the national level, but I'm really proud of the diversity and the encompassing, the very well encompassed group that Washington's sending. I would hope that other states are sending as representative of a group, And I mean, I guess for some states that doesn't mean much. I mean, that might be basically mostly, white and black people, and that basically sums it up.
Yep.
But hopefully that they were able to engage in some of those smaller minority communities and some of those areas that are traditionally broken up by those lines, and they were
Yep.
able to get them at the next level, so that you guys will have uh,
Ally.
delegations from other states that look something like you guys do as a delegation.
I mean, but that's one of the things I think we have to focus on, regardless of what Senator Sanders does. I think there's a problem that we have as liberals with some of the younger, more privileged crowd coming in that doesn't realize their privilege just yet. But I think what we really should focus on is this sense of unity that we have as a group. We're this amazing coalition of people that have put things to the side, have put and so I have a friend who's a libertarian, right? You would think we would absolutely hate each other, total opposite sides of the spectrum, but we found that we agreed on almost everything. We just didn't agree on how to get there. Social issues, total agreement. Economic, we have different ways we want to see things done. But that's kind of what Senator Sanders has done. He's opened those lines of communications. He's brought in Republicans. He's brought in independents. He's brought in Democrats. He's brought in socialists, Marxists, communists, and shown everybody that, hey, we have this common ground. We have an amazing and very powerful voice. So I think that's what it means. If Bernie leaves, I think it means we still have this amazing cohort, this large number of Americans who truly want to see this country move forward, not this incremental trickle down type bullcrap that we've been fed forever, but real, lasting, and valuable change. And I think that we found that working together is the only way we're going to be able to get that change moving forward. So I think really, no matter what he does, he's fundamentally changed the way we view ourselves as liberals, as American voters in general. He's made an indelible mark on this race, on this party, on this movement. And I think it continues forward with or without him, because it is not about, as he says in his own campaign, he says, it's not me, us. And that single phrase does more to encapsulate Bernie Sanders and his politics than any act of concession ever would.
I think you nailed it 100%. And on that note of it's not me, it's us, I'd like to bring Brandon back on from earlier in the show. If you missed it, Brandon is also known as a BS Opinion. He's been a frequent visitor in chat, and he looked like he had a lot of different things to say on. So we're covering anything that came up during the show or just recently with Adair, so feel free. Get in here. I want to have a conversation. Make sure you unmute yourself.